Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I am here along with Amy Burke, and then Danielle Daly is in the background. We gave her the day off as far as getting on the camera, so she'll be in the chat box for everybody. We are meeting today to talk about positive psychology, thriving in everyday life. We still have a lot of people jumping on here, so we will get going. Amy, should we get going? It looks like a lot of people are still jumping on.
Yeah, why don't we give it just a couple of minutes?
We'll give it 2 minutes and then we'll start.
Warm up their coffee.
Okay.
Looks like you need to get a different drink. Did you just finish that?
No, I didn't finish it. Why do you think that?
Because you were up high when you were drinking. It's like you're a spokesperson for that. What is it? Celsius?
I don't want to say what it is because it's not good for you and people will yell at me.
As we're going to talk about health.
It's my coffee replacement. Thanks, Christine. I do have a choice. You're right. I always appreciate you being on here. If you just jumped on, we're just waiting for everybody to get on. So if you don't hear anything, we're just kind of hanging on for a few minutes. And when Danielle tells me to go, then we will get going. Yes, you are all muted and your cameras are off, so no worries. Are we ready, AB? Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy hump day. Thanks for everyone saying good morning. It's beautiful outside. Let's get to spend the morning with us. What more could you want, right? We're here today to talk about positive psychology, thriving in everyday life. This is a new topic for us. It's a new series, so we're excited to roll this out for you guys. Before, we are going to do a couple of little housekeeping things here. Everyone is muted and your cameras are disabled. If you go over to your chat box, make sure that the little blue drop down says everybody. If you just have the host selected, then your messages will just go to Amy and I, but if you click everybody, then everybody can see our messages. So this will be our main form of communication here. I think the pandemic all taught us pretty well how to use Zoom here, but just if you need a little refresher. Since we can't hear you, we can't see you, this is how you guys will ask us questions, comments, be funny, tell us a joke, doesn't matter. If you guys have been to any of our webinars before, you know that Amy and I are like squirrels. We're all over the place a little bit and we like to hear from you guys. We like to hear what you guys have to say. So don't be afraid to use that. Danielle did send out this morning the packet that we will be reviewing, as well as a handout. If you didn't receive that, she was having a hard time with the amount going through. Some of them were getting rejected. So if you didn't get that, don't worry, you'll get it again when she sends your continuing education form out. So you guys will get that emailed to you with the email address you guys provided when you registered for this webinar. So you'll get your continuing education, and then you'll also get the handout, and you will get the packet that we're reviewing today. So don't worry if you didn't receive it this morning. Please give her at least 14 business days to get those out. We have just under 400 people on here now, so it will take her some time to get them. Be patient. If after 14 days you haven't got it yet, then go ahead and reach out to her. She put her email address right in her little box right there, ddaily@hope.us. So go ahead and reach out to her if you guys didn't receive anything after those 14 days. Okay. So this is just a breakdown of the series. So it is a 6-part series. So today we're doing session 1, which is your overview of positive psychology. Amy, we weren't very creative in our title here. Everyone else has cool titles and we have positive psychology, but that's all right. So today is just an overview. So we're going to go over just the umbrella of what everything entails in positive psychology, just give you a little bit of taste of that. And then they are going to do 4 breakout sessions or webinars that have the components, a couple components of positive psychology. So power of moments, flow, mental toughness, and power of relationships are all some of the foundations of positive psychology. So we're going to break those down into those 4. So we'll briefly touch on those 4 today, and then they'll expand upon those in those different sessions. And then we will wrap up the session with session 6, which is taking everything that we have reviewed and then applying it. Amy, I heard that the mental toughness and the application one was like a terrible speaker. So I would tell people not to go to that, right? Yeah, I'm just kidding, guys. It's me and Amy again for that one. So if you don't like Amy and I, then we're doing this one as well as the mental toughness and the application part. So that is what, just so you guys get an understanding of what the series is. So if you haven't registered for the other ones, go ahead and register. You don't have to go to all of them, but it will just make more sense if you do participate in the whole series.
Yeah, so we always try to think of a clever way to sort of introduce ourselves. And with it being Thanksgiving next week, that's right, folks, next week is Thanksgiving. I'm not sure how it happened, but 1 week from today is the day before Thanksgiving. So I thought it would be nice if everybody could just throw in the chat and we'll tell you just some things that we're thankful for. And so I will start. I'm Amy Burke. I'm one of the directors of ICPN, and I'm also a behavior analyst where I'm part of the Rockford team. And so I don't know, we talk a lot about being grateful and values in what we do. And so I'm thankful for a lot of things, like my family, of course, is one thing, but I'm also thankful for being able to put my feet on the ground every morning. And I really try to like ground myself in a nice cup of hot coffee and a group of coworkers that embrace my leaving my coffee cups all over the office and just sort of, laugh at me about it. And, Anna we were talking about things we were thankful for, and she mentioned a good belly laugh. And I'm like, you know what? I am too. Like laughing so hard that your stomach hurts and being with people that make you laugh that hard that your stomach hurts. And so I think that as we go through this topic today, you guys are filling the chat with so many good things. Think about those things, and when we get to the application piece of this, we're going to talk about some of those things and how we can, take that. And some of them are cliche, right? Like I am thankful for every day. I am thankful for, my family and my friends, but those things are going to help sort of take us from one thing to the next as we go through this. So there's so many, great things that people are saying. Ted Lasso, right? Like we'll talk about how that relates to this. I'm with you. Binge watching TV. I'm so into this Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing. I'm down the dark hole, right? Anna, come on. I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for it. What are you thankful for?
Okay. Well, I'm thankful that you like stuff like that because it's entertaining, but I tried to be a little specific, so I am thankful for podcasts because I'm in the car a lot and it helps me learn stuff that I probably wouldn't have before. I'm thankful that my 92-year-old grandmother got to visit last week. I only get to see her a couple times a year, so that was awesome. I'm thankful for hot water because my hot water heater went out and I went a week without hot water and I was just like devastating to me, as stupid as that sounds. So I was very thankful for hot water. And then I'm thankful for grace and humor. Grace, because I feel like we become more forgiving human beings and allows us to make more mistakes and try to put ourselves out there and do new things. And people just seem to me like we're being more graceful. At least I'm trying to surround myself and try to practice that myself too.
Yeah, so I mean, I see a lot of things like, we have people talking about how they're grateful for their coworkers that showed. And that's so important, right? Surrounding yourself and being surrounded every day by people that are embrace you and everything about you and have the same sort of value and mission as you. We saw somebody that was also thankful for football, Anna. So it's not
Not
just me.
me, not me.
Um, a lot of people that sort of are thankful for a higher power and laughing. There was somebody that said, baby giggles, right? Like what a great thing to be thankful for. So this is so awesome, you guys. Thank you for sharing the things that you're thankful for, and we will move forward.
I love Pop-Tarts. That's funny.
Somebody said Birkenstocks, and they're not wrong because I'm
Yes.
thinking about getting a new pair of clogs actually.
Ooh.
So yeah.
So if Amy doesn't respond, she's online shopping pretty much. Okay. Oh, someone just sent me a message. Oh, I didn't introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Anna Vivanti. I also work for Hope. I've been with ICPN for, I don't know, 13 years. And then I also have an opportunity now where I'm doing some consulting work for Hope Behavioral Consulting. So I get to work with a lot of our local agencies. So that's really cool. So I'm thankful for that opportunity as well. And I am a licensed social worker. Okay. Just the boring old agenda. We're going to go over the intro, positive psych, PERMA, which is your pillars of positive psych, some resources and some questions. Like I said, this is a brand new training, so it's one of those that we don't know if we're going to be rushing through the end or if we're going to have extra time. We have no idea, so we're just going to roll with it and see what you guys want to talk about, how interactive you are with certain sections. If not, we'll keep breezing through to the next thing. Okay, what is positive psych? So while I just talk here for a few minutes, type in the chat box if you know what positive psychology is, if you have a guess what it is, if there's a buzzword around positive psychology that makes you think of it, just anything in the box just to see if you guys have any experience with it. If you don't know anything, then just guess. They'll just be entertaining for us to see what you guys put. But the big thing with positive psychology is it's a science. So it's not a self-help technique. And that's the bad rap that it gets. You walk into Barnes and Noble and you pull out that self-help book of how I'm going to become a better person or something like that. That is just absolutely not true. It is a science. So my goal for you today is to get a taste of what positive psychology is. And if it sounds interesting to you, then there's so many podcasts and resources and books. I have a whole mountain of books over here on positive psychology. Because once you learn what the umbrella of positive psychology is, then you can start learning about the pillars. And then within the pillars, you can start learning about the evidence-based applications that you can start doing to hopefully be able to practice some positive psychology on your own. But this is something that I have really gravitated toward in the last year or two. I talk about a little bit during the pandemic that, I don't know, I just felt so emotionally drained and exhausted and tired of focused on just the negative. And I wanted just kind of a breath of fresh air and how I could become a healthier person, not just physically, but mentally. And I needed kind of a roadmap to do that. So positive psychology is just a really cool way of learning about your overall well-being, which is what positive psychology is. It is the science of well-being and is based off the premise that it can be defined, measured, and then we can teach or we can learn those different aspects of positive psychology. So Amy, what are some of the things people put in the chat box about it? Where'd you go, Amy?
Sorry.
Did anyone put anything in the chat box about positive psychology that stuck out?
Oh, yeah, a lot of people. Sorry.
Squirrel.
So, yeah, somebody said flourishing. So we have a plus student here, focusing on the positive, reframing your negative thoughts, mindfulness to keep aspects of life moving forward, focusing on life's positive qualities, kindness and uplifting, appreciating yourself. So there's a lot of close sort of approximations of what we're going to talk about.
Okay, good. Yep, some of the buzzwords that I think about are happiness, gratitude, resilience, self-efficacy, flourishing, positive emotions. So there's some of them that just come to mind. So good, you guys have a lot of idea already of what it is. Okay, so this is just something that I came across. I love it. It's actually hanging in my dining room. I'm just going to read it to you guys. It's life is amazing, and then it's awful, and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. Breathe in the amazing, hold on through the awful, and exhale, relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living heartbreaking, soul healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life, and it's breathtakingly beautiful. I don't know what it is about this, but it just makes so much sense to me about living in the moment. Positive psychology is not about ignoring stress. It's not about thinking everything is positive all the time. It's changing your thought process and being more mindful of what it is, and then being able to flip the script. So whether you are in whatever season you are in life, maybe you are having a really great season, maybe things are awesome. Maybe you are having a terrible time right now. Maybe you're dealing with health issues, whatever it is, and it's awful. Or maybe you're kind of like me. I'm kind of just in that middle section where it's just kind of ordinary or something, that things are okay. It doesn't matter what season you're in, that we need to really stop and pay attention and be mindful of what it is we're going through at this time. And if you guys like this, it's on Etsy. Go on Etsy, and if you put this in, then there's a ton of cool ones that you can print off and put in your house. So anyways. Okay. So just for the little boring definitions here. So there's a whole bunch of definitions of positive psychology. These are just the 3 that I pulled out that I liked. Scientific study of optimal human functioning, aimed to discover and promote factors that individuals and communities need to thrive. I chose that one from Seligman because the big thing with positive psychology is that we want to practice our own well-being, but we practice our well-being so then we can be members of our community and our society and all work together as that circle of support. So it's not just about ourselves, it's about everyone around us as well. Also the study of human thought, feelings, and behavior that focuses on strength and not weaknesses. Good life instead of repairing the bad, and taking the loved average people up to great instead of focusing solely on those who are struggling up to normal. And then the easy definition is constitutes the pleasant life, the engaged, and the meaningful life. So there's a whole bunch of different definitions. I bet there's 20, 30 of them if you start looking them up, but these are the ones that made the most sense to me. Okay, so this next little section, I'm actually excited because Amy usually has control over when I can change the PowerPoint, but she doesn't today, so she can't hurry me through this. So just real quick, I wanted to give a little bit of background as to how we got to the point of positive psychology and what it was like before this. So if you think this is a snore fest and you don't like the whole history, then just go fill up your coffee cup and take a little potty break. But for some of us who do like the history, before World War II, so Amy, what year was World War II?
Please don't embarrass me.
Yes.
I don't even have like an educated guess, like 1945.
Oh, you cheater. You cheater. Okay. Sorry,
Laura,
that's just a fun game Amy and I like to play with each other. Okay. So prior to World War II, so World War II was 39 to 45. Psychology was on the path. They had 3 different tracks. So we had 3 goals. We wanted to, 1, cure mental illness, 2, enhance the lives of the quote unquote normal typical population. And then 3 is they wanted to study geniuses. They thought by studying geniuses that we could really learn from that. But then this war hit, right? World War II hit, and all of these soldiers and families, we had all these soldiers wounded now all of a sudden. We had psychiatric problems that we had never seen before, not never, but at this high of a rate. So the research funding got pulled for all of the other tasks except for curing this mental illness. Prior to the first DSM, does anybody know what PTSD was called for the other wars? It was called shell shock. So that was their actual, like, oh, there you go. Good job, Carolyn. It was called shell shock before that. So from 39 to 45, we had this big war going on, and all the funding got pulled and put into our pathology. What is wrong with people? How are we going to fix PTSD, the shell shock? We had anxiety and depression, even though that wasn't the term for it at the time. We had all of these issues going on, all of this trauma, right? So all of that funding that got pulled into that was great, because then what came out of it was the DSM, right? So after we came up with the DSM, then we were actually able to diagnose people more appropriately than in the past. You know, before that, in the early 1900s, it was insanity, it was hysteria, things like that. We didn't have names and we couldn't diagnose people. So now in 52, when the first DSM came out, it was a huge eye opener that now we could diagnose people more appropriately, right? So a couple years after the first DSM came out, then we had the peak of institutionalized living. So we were dumping more and more and more people into the institutions. The good thing that came out of that is we were able to really study diagnoses, and we started actually researching and coming up with our evidence-based practices, some very inhumane. We all know the history and what was happening in the institutions. But the good thing that came out of it was, so 53 was the peak, and then 55, our first antipsychotic drug came out. So when that first antipsychotic drug came out, then our hospitalizations went way down, because we figured out that with the right medications and the right diagnosis, that people could actually return back to their family homes, and they could live and they could thrive and they could be a part of community. Now that took decades of getting to that point, but that first antipsychotic drug is really what started that downward trend of that deinstitutionalization. And then we came out with the revised DSM in 68. So then from 68 until, you know, the 90s, we were spending a lot of time still on the pathology, which is where our clinical psychology comes from, our therapy models and things like that, that people would come to you with their issues, with their symptoms, and we would be able to work with that distress, those stressors and things like that. Then a guy came along called Seligman, and this is a picture of him. And he can be attributed to the positive psychology movement. He was actually a professor, and he had spent his whole life prior to that studying learned helplessness. At the same time, if any of you guys remember studying, I think it was in like the early 90s, was the big self-esteem movement, where all of our research then was being dumped into self-esteem. And the whole premise was that self-esteem was the root of our problems, and that was causing societal problems. So that's where the whole everybody gets a trophy and everything came from, is we were trying to build up our youth self-esteem because we thought that that would then have an impact on our society. So Seligman did not like the way that this was going. So he decided that he was going to become, he was going to run for the president of the American Psychological Association. So he did that in 98, and he was named president. And then a year later, he waited to get his foot in the door. Then he reintroduced his agenda to the Psychological Association, that he wanted to not just focus on the pathology, but he wanted to refocus and pivot on how we could enhance our lives, how we could become better human beings. And he wanted people to start spending and investing this money into our potential and not just our shortcomings. So he still liked the idea that we needed pathology and we needed to be able to study and research, and we need our DSM and we need clinicians, but he also wanted a more well-rounded paradigm that we could have, that we are also going to focus on the good things as well. So that's where positive psychology came from. It's relatively new. It has some components of things in the past, but it is a newerish thing that we have really started to zone in here in the last couple decades. Okay, so just a little quick true or false. I need to fix what is wrong with me so I can make it better. If I can just not be anxious, I would be so much better off. I do not have a mental health diagnosis, nor do I need therapy, so I must be happy and doing things right. I'm not depressed, so I must be happy. My depression is better this month, so I must be feeling joy. In the absence of mental health issues is a presence of positive mental health. So basically, these are all false. My whole point here is that the absence of having a mental health issue or a mental health symptom or something that's interfering with your life does not mean that you have well-being. So just because I'm not depressed right now doesn't mean I have joy. And that's what Seligman's whole point was, is that we can't just focus on what's wrong with us. We have to take what our values are, what we're good at, what our strengths are, so that we can have a well-rounded, balanced, what he calls flourishing, right? Just a little example, I was reading in the book about losing weight, for example. So if you have a low to moderate stress level, and you're not anxious, you're not depressed, why is it that you can't lose weight, right? If there's a correlation between losing weight and stress, why do a lot of us have so much issues losing weight? Well, this paradigm would tell us that it's not about the stress level, it's about your ability to handle stress. So for me, if I have a pretty low stress level, but every time my 6-year-old has a tantrum or I become irritated or something and I go and eat instead of having a more effective coping strategy, it doesn't matter that my coping or that my stress levels are relatively low. So Seligman was really challenging people that just because you don't have just because you have an absence of something doesn't mean that you have the other side of it. So what he's really trying to do is teach us these components of positive psychology so that we can handle what it is that life throws at us. Does that make sense? Okay. So we didn't do this search ourselves, but we read about it. And I guess I'm not surprised by this, but if you do just an abstract search from those years there listed, these are the number of abstracts of articles that you can read about anger, anxiety, and depression. So depression has over 54,000 abstracts you can read about. Whoops. Anxiety has 41,000, anger has 5,000. So on the other side of that, if you look up any positive sort of things, joy, happiness, and life satisfaction, it's significantly lower in the amount of articles that you can find on the positive emotions like that. So although it's not completely alarming, it is kind of, I don't know, sad to see, I guess, that there's not as much. Now, I will say from 2000 until now, if we redid it, hopefully there would be more because of positive psychology on that side.
Yeah. And I hope we have a little bit of an increase too, once we can sort of relook at the numbers coming out of a pandemic, right? Where I feel like we hopefully have learned to focus on the good a little bit more. And so I think when we were talking about this the other day, Anna, when we were putting this together, it's kind of staggering because it's like from a numbers perspective, it's like 21 to 1 negative to positive, which is insane, right? There's so much negativity in the world, and here we are just like researching it like crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so just a quick little note here. These are the application of positive psychology. So these are the things that we have decided, as a society, that can come out of positive psychology, especially when we study it. So a lot of people don't think about these things in here, but these are a product of studying positive psychology. So when we talk about our creativity, humor, courage, justice is a big one right now. Life coaching is a huge one right now. These are all things that are coming out of studying positive psychology. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think that the justice, coaching, and resilience were the three that were kind of getting the most attention right now. But the big thing is to remember that these are all things that we can define, measure, and then apply to our lives. So again, back to that scientific study approach. So there's three vital elements to positive psychology. The first is your positive experiences. So that's, pretty obvious. It's the events in our lives that are going to lead to growth and have lead us to achieving our goals and having fulfillment. So we have those experiences in our lives that we can all talk about. I think that when we, Amy, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a positive experience in your life?
Well, I was with,
Who you're with?
yeah.
Okay. Positive state and traits. So our emotions that we experience during that time. So Amy, that specific experience of who you were with, do you remember what state or what emotion you were experiencing in that time?
Yeah, usually some sort of like, happiness or joy or, gratitude.
Yep. And then positive institutions is how we are connected to and applying those principles to the organization. So when we look at positive psychology, we're always looking at that experience, what's going on, and then those emotions that we experienced with it, and then where we experienced it, or how we're going to use that to then apply to other places, into our organization and institutions. So is it school, work, family, whatever it is. So those are the three elements that they have identified are most important in studying positive psychology and really zoning in on. And this was the first breakdown of positive psychology and how they were going to look at it and study it. Positive psychology allows us to flip the script. So instead of saying, how can we treat anxiety so it doesn't come back, we can reframe it. How can I teach you to recognize and manage the symptoms? Manage anxiety better. Someone asked in the chat box about your threshold. It's absolutely about your threshold. And that would be your resilience, right? So how can I improve my threshold so that I can have a better stress response? So I can have more emotional regulation. So I can, so all of those parts are all out of focusing on your strengths and what you're good at. Amy has a lot of humor, a lot of sarcasm, which are great, awesome strengths to have. So how can we use that to her advantage to help her well-being and her, overall, life. So it's taking what it is you're good at and what your strengths are, and then really using that to your advantage. Like I
Yeah,
said
I just want to
earlier,
touch on something really quickly because I think it's important because that grit and resiliency, and we'll get more into that in our training that we're going to do, but I think it's important for people to understand that we're not talking about taking it, right? Like you don't just have to take everything that comes your way and not sort of like just embrace it. You don't have to embrace people being mean to you. Don't have to embrace, chaos. We all have choices. And so I always think about the saying that, I'm going to butcher it a little bit here, but that life isn't about, what happens to you. It's about how you respond to it, sort of thing. Right. And I think that's sort of what we're talking about in terms of flipping the script. It's our response to it, and it's our ability to sort of decide what we're going to do because we do have a choice. And so when we talk about that grit part of it, I just want to make sure we're clear that we're not saying that you just have to take everything that comes your way.
Yep, it's just a mindset, flipping that around so that you view things in a different way. Something that always comes to mind is Kim Shantz and I, when we were doing my supervision hours, I'm pretty open about talking about caretaking for my dad with dementia. And we started flipping it that I don't have to take care of him. I get to take care of him. There's 6 of us and only 2 of us live close. So I get to be able to do that. And I get to go over there every day and spend time with them and things like that. So that's one way that you can really flip the script is, that's awesome that I get to do that. I bet you his other daughters wish they were closer and got to do that. So after I got that mentality out of my head, it really opened it up to a more positive experience in just caretaking.
Yeah, and Anna's pretty open about talking about this journey, so I'm not really talking about anything out of context. But when he was first diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, it was sort of it was hard. It was hard to listen to you sort of talk about that. There was a lot of frustration there in that caretaking part, and you could see sort of your mindset switch over times. And now, you know, when you're over there, you know the stories are funny. You sort of embrace what's happening, and it's really truly a ride. And so you're sort of a testament to really truly flipping that script makes a huge difference in how things are perceived.
Yeah, like my mom says, either you can laugh about it or you can cry about it. I mean, even last night she was sending me texts that hallucinations are a big thing with Lewy body, and there was 3 people that he thought was sitting at the bar, and he was asking to serve them a drink. And a year ago, my mom probably would have cried and said, "I can't believe this." And now she's just texting me like, "Well, I asked him who it was and if it was, you know, anyone famous or if I knew him." And so we're just using that humor to just you know, take what comes at us and try to, you know, live every day the best we can. Okay, so people our social workers like me, we're very educated, and our whole education is based on theories, right? Like all of the things that we do, our strength-based theories, everything like that is kind of what gets us on the right trajectory when we are working with people. So I just threw these on here. I won't talk about them a long time because it's probably boring to most of you, but these are the 4 theories that positive psychology comes from. So we have the hope theory, the resilience theory, the flow theory, and the strength theory. So of those 4, they took those 4 and put them together, and that's how positive psychology, that's another framework that it went down. We talked about resilience a little bit. You know, hope seems like a hokey thing, but it's really not. It's about knowing that you can achieve goals and that you can create strategies to get there. I think hope is a cool thing that kind of emerged too out of the pandemic, is we were all just wanting to get out so bad that we learned that hope is a really strong thing. Flow is something that we'll talk about as well. Flow is really important in our lives. It's hard to find it, but once you do, it's a great thing to do, or to be able to get to. So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then your strength, again, using what it is that's meaningful to you, what you're good at, and using that to create the best version of yourself. Okay, understanding emotion is at the core. So I just put this on here because I wanted to make sure that we understood the difference between mood and emotion. So mood is like that long state. Like we all hear someone say like, "Man, they're in a mood today," right? Like as soon as Amy walks in the door in the morning, she always wears her emotions right on her. I can tell exactly what mood she's in, right? And then our emotion is that specific, what do we feel at that specific time? You know, it's not that like longer period. It's like, "Oh man, I, you know, my daughter just graduated and I feel pride," that sort of thing. It's very specific to that. But what is really important is that our emotions are what shape our responses to things. So for example, I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I feel like all she wants to do is spend my money, go to Starbucks, a typical middle school girl stuff, right?
Don't forget
So
about Lululemon, Dick's Sporting Goods, Target.
she's my broke best friend. That's all I can say. And Amy's got one of those too. Hers is just a little bit older. um, but one day she could come home from school and I had a good day. Maybe I had a good session, a good therapy session with the client or whatever it is. And I'm feeling joy. I'm feeling good. And she's like, "Hey mom, do you want to like, you know, go to Starbucks or something and spend some time together?" And I'm like, "Oh, sweet. Like she likes me today. Like we're going to go do something fun together. I'm going to be like that fun, adventurous mom. I'm going to drop everything and we're going to go to Starbucks, maybe hit up the mall so she can spend some of my money. Like this is cool, right? We're bonding and everything is great." Come the next day, and maybe I had a shitty day at work, right? Maybe one of my therapy sessions went south. Maybe someone was served a discharge I didn't like, maybe whatever it is. So maybe I'm feeling, you know, distraught or disgusted or frustrated, whatever it is. She can come home and be like, "Mom, do you want to go to Starbucks today?" And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I don't want to go buy an $8 drink today. Like, I've been on the car all day. You want me to drive back to Rockford? Like, what am I, made of money? And I could totally rip her head off, right? And she's like looking at me like, whoa. But the point is that our emotions are how we're going to respond to things. So it's what motivates our actions. So I could take a step back and I could say, okay, Anna, like, you're emotional right now. You're not in a good spot. Your mood is not good. Like, just tell her, no, not today, right? So that I don't bite her head off and make her feel like crap, right? So it's really important in positive psychology, and that's what it teaches you to do, and which goes into your mindfulness part later, is it just allows you to stop, scan your body, know where you are so that you can react in a healthier manner. And again, then in the future, then you know how to use those adaptive advantages, which is a higher skill to have, but is really cool too. So I just wanted you guys to kind of understand the difference in what a mood and an emotion is. Amy, can you think of a time where you probably had a different response based on your emotion of that time? I'm really putting you on the spot today.
Yeah, you really are. Well, I think the one thing that comes to mind is maybe my experiences with certain situations. And so a lot of times what we do is we're sort of seeing people at their worst, right? Like we don't get referrals when people are having a good day. And so sometimes I go into certain situations with the idea that based on like a previous experience.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yep. So once you start learning your models of positive psychology, is although you have that in your head, you have to stop and actually be objective. And what is it that you're feeling at that time based on your surrounding, the information you have, which is really important. So yeah. Good one, AB. Okay. So we all know we have our negative emotions. Those are like anger, stress, guilt, embarrassment, boredom, envy. So those are the ones that we call our discomforting or our negative emotions. Fredrickson did some research and came up with these are the top 10 positive emotions. There's some conflicting different articles. Some name the top 8, some have 15, whatever it is. I just chose this one from Fredrickson. But these are the top 10 positive emotions that people report to have. Which of these do you guys think is the most complex to study? So if they're going to do research on something and they want to figure out how to have more of this, which one do you guys think is the most complex?
Off the top of my head, I feel like awe comes to mind, right? Like what's awe for me is probably not the same as the majority of the people on here. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people say awe. Serenity is another one. It's very complex, right? Because everybody's sort of peaceful with different things.
Yep. So love is actually the most complex. And it's the most complex because love is a blend, is a mixture of all of the other 9 together. So love is inspiration, it is gratitude, it is awe, it is interest. So it's all of those things together. So to break those down is really challenging. So which one of these do you guys think is reported as happens the most experienced emotion?
I feel like gratitude is a big one now. Love.
Okay, lots of different. Yeah, so I actually put them in reverse order. So love is the most experienced, and then awe, and then inspiration, then amusement, then pride. I was actually really surprised that gratitude was way over there towards the end.
Me too, actually. I didn't know that you did that. So that's
Did I trick you?
You did, actually. Here, I thought I was just playing along.
The interesting thing is that you brought up awe, because awe is the one that surprised me the most. And that's the most transformative process, they called it. And that's the one that's getting a lot of attention and research right now, is awe. And if people are experiencing it the most, they're trying to figure out what leads to awe and how we can get more of it. So there's actually a ton of research here in the works that the researchers are doing, trying to figure out how we can experience that more. So if these are the top 10 positive emotions, we want to figure out how we get more of each of these. So if you, you're trying to practice your positive psychology and your well-being, then we need to learn and be more deliberate in the ways that we experience love and awe and inspiration, amusement, all of these different ones in here. Okay. So next up is how are we doing on time here? 10 to 11. Okay. Is the 6 pillars of positive psychology. So what we just reviewed in this first section is like the components of positive psychology, so you understand what it is as a science. And this is what we call the 6 pillars of psychology. So this is our framework for understanding and measuring well-being. So I talked before about defining, measuring, studying, that sort of thing. So this is what Seligman came up with, that we know we have positive psychology. We know we want to work on our well-being. Now, how do we do that? How do we study it? How do we define it? How do we measure it? So he came up with this framework of PERMA. So you'll hear PERMA a lot. So this is the framework, the umbrella, whatever you want to call it, of positive psychology. So PERMAH, that's the acronym PERMA, stands for positive emotion, and then it's positive engagement, positive relationships, positive meaning, positive accomplishment, and positive health. So each of these things, these components, positive emotion, you can study just that, right? You can study just engagement, just relationship. But what our whole goal is that you learn each of them in different techniques within each of them, so that you can flourish. So flourish is the word when you're able to move from different categories and experience all of it as a whole. So that requires action in each of those spots. So it's not just having that vision board and saying, I want to be more mindful, I want to practice my flow. It's actually deliberately doing it. It's not saying I want to have a positive attitude, but it's taking the time to flip the script. So that's what I like about positive psychology, is it doesn't just have the it's put your money where your mouth is type of thing. You have to be able to back up what it is you're saying. So I talked at the very beginning about what this series would look like. So the positive emotion, that one is broken out into the power of moments. So power of moments is just one way that we can practice having positive emotion. So one of the future webinars is called Power of Moments. So when you guys go to that, the speaker will talk about positive emotion a lot, and they'll talk about how to break that into your power of moments and how to really engage in that specific moment. Your engagement is your flow. So we have a webinar coming up called Flow. So flow is just one way that you can become more engaged. Mental toughness is the next one that Amy and I are doing. So that can be found in the R, how to develop that resilience. Like Amy mentioned earlier, it's not just about taking everything that comes at you, but it's about how to develop, adapt, be flexible, things like that. And then we have Katie doing relationships. So she's going to talk about positive relationships and how to have that healthy relationships and boundaries and things like that. So the big thing to understand too is different strategies can be found in different categories. It's not like a yes or no. So if I'm practicing mindfulness, it doesn't really matter what category it fits in, and mindfulness could fit in engagement, and it also could fit in positive emotion. So I don't want you guys to get too hung up on which strategy goes with which, because depending on what you read, there could be different ones. And that's one of the handouts too that Danielle had sent out and if you didn't get it, remember, you'll get it with your CE, is it just lays out what PERMA is and gives you a little description under it. So that'd be helpful if you guys are interested in learning more about PERMA and you want to listen to a podcast or study something individually, what that will look like. I don't know. I was like thinking about this, and I'm a kid of the 90s, so I kind of remember Like in my class, we had all those posters all over the wall, and there was always that poster with like the four main food groups. Do you remember that, Amy? And like if you ate from each of these four groups, then you were going to be healthy. I think of PERMA is like the same thing. So like these are your food groups, and then you need a little bit of everything to have like a balanced well-being. So that's kind of for some reason what I thought about from my childhood. Okay. So now we're going to talk about just real briefly the PERMAH. We're just going to touch on what it is and some of the applications that you can do for each of them. And then hopefully you guys will become interested in some of them and you can find out more information on each as well. So P is first, positive emotion, application of optimism. So again, this has its own webinar. If you guys want to go ahead and learn a little bit before the webinar, this is a great book. It's called The Power of Moments. I love these kind of books. This one is a really easy read. It's not like too clinical or anything, and it just has some really good ideas of how to create moments and focus on them, the little moments in time versus just the big picture, and how we can deliberately create moments in our life, because we know that the power of moments is important to create that positive emotion. So again, they figured out that if we can live in the moment and we can create more moments that will engage our positive emotion. Why are you laughing at me, Amy? I saw you smirking.
I was laughing because you went out and bought that book again, because I actually gave it away to somebody. So when
Yeah.
Anna says she reads these books, she's not kidding, folks. She reads these books, and I love to, when she talks about them, give them away to people. So she actually went out and bought that one again. So that's what made me laugh, is that I knew you didn't have that.
And this one is at my house, so you can't take it.
The hold up the title of the book again, Anna. Somebody's asking for it. It's The Power of Moments.
So at the very end in the resources, I have a picture of it on there too. Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath.
Yeah, and I don't know if Danielle sent out the PowerPoint ahead of time, but if she didn't, she'll send it out when she sends out your continuing ed, and there's a picture of each of the books in the at the end of the slides.
Okay. So the theory of positive emotion, like we said, is application of optimism. A lot of people gravitate toward negativity, and I don't know if it's, again, my age, I don't know what it is, but you really start to protect your bubble more, I think, as you get older. I don't know what it is, but you start to really focus on who's negative in your life. And once you start to figure this out, it can be exhausting and it can be draining to be around these people, right? So we can't change them, right? We can change ourselves. We can change the way we're acting. We can flip the script towards the negativity. We can avoid them if we have to, or that's an option. But the big thing is that you need to learn skills to create this positivity, right? You need to learn the skill set that you're not always going to go to the negative right away. Amy and I, when we're having like a conversation and it's tough at the end, she's like, let's say something good, like what's something good that happened, or name something good. And she actually does that, like at the end of our conversations when we're talking about something that's, draining or something like that. So finding little ways that you can, she'll say something positive about that person, and then you start to flip the script on them. So it's coming up with different ways that are going to promote and savor those positive emotions that we talked about before, the joy and the awe and things like that. We want more of that. So how can we use our ability to spin that negativity around so that we get more of that for our well-being? And once you start to do this and you identify, and like you said, I've been working really hard this last year on protecting my bubble more. It's kind of, I don't know, I feel like a weight kind of comes off of you. And you might lose some people too along the way, knowing that.
Yeah.
But that's
and
okay.
I feel like you do have to be, it's a choice though, right? Because I think everybody on here what we do is hard every day. The system is hard. the population we serve is hard, the staffing shortage is hard. And so it's easy. It's really, really easy to go down a negative road and find the fault in a situation or a person or a process or a policy or whatever it is. And so it is a challenge to flip that script for sure.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, there's a place, not to get too much into like our fight flight responses and things like that, but we do have a purpose for stress and anxiety, sadness, depression, things like that. So although those are negative emotions, our bodies have those for a reason, right? It helps us process it. It helps us scan. It helps us figure out if we need to fight or flight, whatever it is. So it's not that we don't want to have those emotions. It's that we want to be mindful in what it is we're feeling and make sure that that emotion is appropriate to what it is we're up against. So that's a big one that I always had to challenge myself is, okay, I'm angry right now. Do I have a reason to be angry? What is the reason I'm angry? Like, how can I get through this? How can I push on? That sort of thing, and really taking the time to process that.
Yeah, because there are times where that's okay.
Mhm.
Right? You don't have to walk around and be this happy person all the time. There are times where it's okay to be mad or frustrated.
Absolutely. Yep.
So then we wanted to talk about how to sort of apply each one of these. And we're going to ask you guys to sort of use the chat box and tell us ways that you sort of could apply the idea or the theory of positive emotion. And so mindfulness is one thing that comes to mind, and that's sort of a buzzword, right? There's different apps that you can use to be mindful. There's different ways that you can use to be mindful. And then there's things like, relaxation and yoga that come to mind. But what are some other sort of things that you could do that are simple, quick, to practice that idea of positive emotion? So we have gratitude journaling, acts of kindness, audiobooks, prayer, deep breathing. Right. Those are all things that are perfect examples of positive emotion, right? You playing games with your friends, your colleagues, going outside, indulging in your favorite TVs, music, movies, all things that we talked about that we were sort of thankful and grateful for in the beginning when we introduced ourselves are things that we can sort of embrace to engage in that positive emotion piece, right? Like you talked about how you like, podcasts and your time in the car. Those are things that if done healthy and not a way to remove can apply the idea of positive emotion to everything that we do. Gratitude journaling, making plans for the near and distant future. So we have something to sort of look forward to. How many people have that vacation on their, your next sort of vacation on the books? Music, playing with grandchildren. These are all great things that are exactly the application of positive emotion.
Yep. And the big thing is practicing it. So, it seems so silly, but it's like, why do our kids go to basketball practice every day? Well, to practice their skills for the game, right? Um, but when it comes down to it, we don't practice enough. So if I'm going to use yoga, relaxation, walking in the woods, any of that, if I'm not doing it on a regular basis, my muscle memory is not formed. And then when the game, when the game you practice for comes up, you're not prepared for it. So as a consultant, all the time I'll get called in and they'll say, this person needs to learn to deal with their anxiety. They have panic attacks, da 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 da. And I can work with them, but if they're not practicing these skills during practice time on every day, then when something happens, when real life slaps them in the face, then they're not able to have that muscle memory to be able to use it, right? So if you want to use imagery, relaxation, any of those things, you have got to practice it as much as you can so that when the real game comes and you have to use it, that you're able to pull from that muscle memory and be able to use it. So anytime we have clients that have any sort of dysregulation, anxiety, anything like that, we should be working with them on a constant basis, no matter where they are, whether at CDS, at home, in the car, working on how are you feeling right now? Can you tell me what emotion you're feeling right now? Is it a negative or a positive emotion? Okay, let's do some deep breaths, even if they're calm. Like I said, that's the best time to practice it, because then when real life comes along, if they have not practiced it enough, and we're also dealing with people with dual diagnosis, right? So it's going to be more challenging anyways. Then they're not able to apply those things. So we have to do a really good job on the back end of practicing all of the application so that we can get more of that positive emotion out. Okay, next we have positive engagement, which again, this one has its own session called Finding Your Flow. So flow is just one way that you can get to positive engagement. But it is that long lasting, not fleeting, it's that long lasting enjoyment, not pleasure. I always talk about the difference between dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine is that shot of pleasure, right? It's that it can be sex, it can be shopping, it can be eating, it can be sleeping, it can be fighting with somebody, whatever it is that get that real quick shot of dopamine, right? And that makes people feel good for this long, right? In our office, we have the joke that's what shot of dopamine, right, Amy? Every time you get that email or that text, you're like, wow, yeah, you got that real quick. And it's an actual chemical response in your brain that is happening. What the problem is when we have that shot of dopamine, it's not long lasting. What we want is the serotonin, right? The serotonin comes from enjoyment. We don't get serotonin in those quick bursts. We get it in the longer ones, right? So anything that we get from intellectual stimulation, creativity, that's what's going to give us that long lasting, deeper, longer connection, that feeling of satisfaction in that serotonin. So what's really, really wreaked havoc on our serotonin is what? Phones, electronics, because it is really, really hard. If you have the battle against the serotonin and the dopamine, and your dopamine is going to win, right? Because it's that quick. I just bought this off of Amazon. That felt good. Versus I'm going to go for a long walk in the woods and find my flow. It takes more work. It takes more effort. It takes more deliberate choices. So it's going to lose every time unless you make that conscious, deliberate choice to find something that you can do for enjoyment that gives you that serotonin. It requires us to be present. It doesn't mean binge watching Netflix. It doesn't mean shopping. It means finding something that allows us to be creative, intellectually stimulated, and things like that. Not saying there's anything wrong with doing some Netflix time and things like that, but when we want to be able to find our flow or find that spot in us that we can really get that serotonin going, then we need to be present and mindful and intentional about it. And that's when we feel the most well-being and the most healthy. When that serotonin happens, is it has all these nerve receptors, and your hormones and your neurotransmitters and everything get going, and that's when you start to feel good and your body feels good. And that stuff does not happen when it's the dopamine. It has to happen when it's the serotonin. So how can we get more positive engagement in our lives is your real question here that you need to kind of figure out. And Amy, you can talk about the application of it.
Yeah, I think a little bit about it, like you're challenging that neurological strength, right? You're challenging that creativity and you're developing that, even if you find it hard to focus, right? Like, I feel like that's one thing that technology has given us is that inability to focus. And so you sort of have to sit and persevere through that. And so what sort of things come to mind that we can talk about when we're talking about the application of positive engagement and really developing that neurological strength? For me, I'm envious of people that can play a musical instrument. I think it's, nice when people can sit and read the notes and then make your fingers or whatever sort of play those notes. I'm always envious of that. And I can almost recall like the exact moments where I gave up on that instead of like continuing to practice and, sort of find the beauty in that. And so what sorts of other things, writing, sewing, cross stitching, yoga, meditation. And how many people meditate and then give up because your mind is drifting, right? And so that's, you don't give up, you sort of persevere through that. Everybody minds drift during that, but it's about staying present and focused and really developing that neuro sort of cognitive processes. Painting is a great one. Sherry just mentioned painting, practicing baking or cooking or new recipes. What can you think of anything that I didn't sort of mention? Puzzles became huge during the pandemic. People sort of found that as a way to really focus on positive engagement, being present for that.
Yep, and it's anytime you get into that flow state where time drifts by. So I should have mentioned that earlier, but anytime you can get into something that you get so engrossed in it that you forget about everything else that's happening. Because again, that's when that serotonin takes place. So for me, Amy's really taken up exercise and Pilates and stuff during the pandemic. I feel like I've gone through every sort of thing and I kind of have failed at it because I need to persevere more to find what that is. But I also, when I was going through this presentation, I was thinking about, what it is that made me happy. And, I'm a very competitive person. I love high school athletics, middle school athletics. So I was thinking about it and I'm like, when I'm watching my daughter, she does travel sports. When I'm watching her, I am in a flow state. I don't pay any attention to anything else. I'm in it. Same thing like when I'm playing pickleball or whatever it is, I like those hard jarring type of things that allows me to get more in a flow state. And it's not the traditional, what we're talking about as far as gardening and finding like a good serenity type thing. So it can be different things for different people. I do want to work more on finding those places like gardening and things like that I will be able to get in the flow state. But I think it's okay too to understand that there's different sort of movement and different things that people will respond to get them in a different flow state. Weightlifting, my daughter does CrossFit and she loves it. That's her thing. That's her space. That's what lets her get into her flow state. Interesting things too, before we move on, is that there's a lot of research being done right now into flow states and positive engagement and the impact on soldiers. So they're trying to figure out, again, with your PTSD and things like that, they're trying to figure out, some evidence-based strategies and things like that we can help our soldiers when they come back to help them get in that flow state. We talk about volunteering a lot with them and becoming part of the community and things like that. But they're really working hard on to figuring out a little bit more of what can be done with the soldiers to develop some resilience and have impactful work and things like that when they come back. Okay. Next is positive relationships, and that's about authentic connections. Again, so this has its own session. We talk a lot about resilience and grit. Amy and I talk about that. I guess maybe a good way to do this is put in the chat box if you can think of what are some characteristics you think of in a positive relationship. So think of somebody that you have a positive relationship with and what characteristics come to mind when you think of that.
Yeah, mine is trust.
Okay.
I'm also big on sort of like mutual respect.
Sure.
We don't have to agree, but we, need to be respectful of each other.
Mm-hmm.
What is yours?
Yeah, I think trust and feeling valued, definitely. Just want to know that you're being heard and it's okay, like you said, that you have a difference in opinion, just that they're listening to you. So it is a theory of making connections with people. This is what, the researchers have identified as some of the most important characteristics. So I don't know if any of you feel like you're in a toxic relationship or you have a toxic relationship. Maybe it's a sister, maybe it's an old friend that you grew up with or something, but it's a little bit lopsided, unhealthy. Hopefully you're not in an abusive relationship, but if you are, these are things to think about when you're making connections with people. And the one thing that the pandemic taught us is that we have to have connections with people. And that's just not just saying it because we learned it, it's research driven that connections matter. Think about not only how much depression and anxiety our clients had when they came home, but how hard it was to get them back, right? Back to day programs and stuff again, because it is just jarring on us. There's research out there about our pain centers, just tons of stuff that talks about what happens when we don't have connections with people. So Amy, do you want to talk about some applications of how we can build on our positive relationships with people?
Yeah, I think that, the takeaway from this is that, and I encourage all of you to put sort of in the chat about, what it is that you do to build those connections with people and maintain those. And we sort of gave technology and social media a little bit of a bad rap in the beginning, but I think this is where it comes into play, right? Because it has allowed us to sort of, especially during the pandemic, I don't know how many of you had, drinks with your friends, hiding out in your bathroom. I know it wasn't just me. We all sort of stayed connected that way. And so it's building and creating better connections, even when distance becomes in our way. And I think that that is one thing that technology and social media has sort of allowed us to do. And I think there's a rabbit hole you can go down with it, right? But there's also, it's nice to be connected with my family that's in Ohio and Kansas and Minnesota that I wouldn't have had that before. And so things that sort of come to mind to me that are not just like little things like going out to dinner with people, it's picking up the phone and calling and checking in or sending a note. How many of you still love to get mail or have somebody sort of say that they're thinking of you? And this for me has been sort of a slap in the face, because you sort of want to dismiss how important it is. But I recently have had a health issue that I am fine from, but the connection that I felt from people sort of going into that situation was it really truly like took my breath away, how many people thought of me and reached out. And it really sort of gave me a different perspective on the importance of those connections. And then I'm going to turn 50 here in a matter of a few days. And so the things that people have done or reached out, or, I went and saw somebody that I hadn't seen in a while and she had a birthday card for me. Those little things just sort of resonated with me and were so important. And so I think that there's a lot of little things that we sort of take for granted, but then when they happen to you, they're so meaningful. So chatting with a stranger, finding somebody at, your daughter's games to sort of spend time with, you walk away and you sort of find somebody that maybe is there for the same reason as you, and volunteering at a church or finding a common sort of group of people that are, meaningful, a cause, whatever that is.
Yeah, so identifying your circles of support is a really easy way. I actually do this in some house training meetings when I'm consulting. Is if I were to write my circles of support, so I'm going to draw a circle for each of my different circles of support. I'd have my family, I would have my work friends, I would have, my 6 best friends I still have from elementary school. I have, the parents of my daughter's sports who I spend a lot of time with. So we have all of these circles, my church family, things like that. And we have a lot of circles of support, and we need that, right? We need those different circles that give us different parts of those positive relationships. I know there was a lot on there about church and things like that. That's what fills your cup. That's what gives you those positive emotions. But do it with the individuals that we're providing services to. And it's really, really eye-opening. A lot of them don't have more than 1 or 2 circles of support. So it's our job to create more circles of support for them, you know, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of deliberate choice and things like that. But that's one of the reasons, not to get back into your pain center, but your pain centers, once you don't have these circles of support, your pain centers start to become activated. And that's when you start to scan what's for threats is called, which is when we start to feel isolated, our anxiety, our depression, which is what happened during the pandemic for a lot of people. And those pain centers really, really become overactivated because we didn't have another circle of support to pull in for a lot of these people that we're providing services for. When you're feeling loneliness, loneliness is actually a very evolutionary trait. And that is signaling to you when you feel loneliness that I need to get back to my tribe. I need to get back to that circle of support. When you don't do that and you don't listen to that, that neurotransmitter telling you that, that's when we get depression, right? So we usually feel lonely before that depression hits. That's because our head is saying, our brain is saying, you're lonely, get back, get back, get back. And when we don't do that is when our depression starts to get worse and worse, and then it's hard to get out of that. So identifying what your circles of support are in your next meeting with your DSPs is usually eye-opening because they see just the small amount of people of circles of support that some of our people, some of our clients have, and how we can then, how we can activate that and have some more circles of support for them. There we go. Okay, M, so we're on the M in the PERMA, purposeful existence. Again, this is another one that is a real game changer. If if I ask Amy what her meaning in life may be, she can probably tell me, she's a mom, she finds meaning in being a wife, a mom, a director of a big program, all of these things. But if you stop and actually ask the individuals that we're providing services to, or, if they're not verbal or they don't have the ability to, what is their meaning? Do they have a meaning in their life? Do they have people that connect with them? Do they have a purpose? Do they have experiences in their life that are going to affect them? It's really, really eye-opening, and research is telling us that we have to find meaning in our life if we want to have this well-rounded well-being, right? Like we all want to feel like we're needed, that we have a purpose and things like that. And some of the people that we're providing service to don't have that sense of meaning, and it's our job to help them get to that point where they have that feeling of meaning. So here's a couple ways we can do that. A, B.
Yeah, I think for me, the sort of takeaway from this is, that you want to make things meaningful without making them obsessive. And because I think when you do that, especially from a work perspective, you sort of risk that burnout piece, and so it is finding your values and sort of that higher purpose with still sort of navigating the other sorts of things. And I think that, your thought process about like the 4 main food groups is important, because just making one thing meaningful without sort of having the other things that we've discussed is where we sort of run into issues. And so meaning for me, I think about, we've had a lot of people talk about different sort of spiritual activities, that sort of is a meaning to me, or commemorating loved ones, a special sort of commemorative for loved ones, or a charity, or I like my sort of love language in meaning is gifts. And so I like to find, ways to sort of be creative and gift things to people that may be meaningful. Yeah, I mean, I think this one is, you have to sort of know what fills your cup and find ways to sort of embrace that each and every day.
Yeah, and a good way to, or a good place to start, if this is something you're interested in, is, there's a ton of value exercises out there. So Amy and I talk a lot in our webinars about living a value-based life. We talk about values in our work culture. I always brag that Amy's done a really good job within ICPN of identifying and asking each of us what our values are. She has a form she fills out, or we send out a couple times a year, and we rate our values. And then she comes up and she tells us these were our top 6 values. How are we going to move towards that, with joy or humor or, flexibility, balance, whatever it is that we've identified for our values. How can we live that way? How can we make decisions deliberately in our work? If balance is a big one, how can we have better balance? How can we change our work schedules? How can we make it to the important events in our lives and don't miss them? So she's done a really good job of identifying what our values are, and then not just leaving it at that. How can we incorporate it into our work life so that we are actually living those values? There's a ton of application for values. There's a lot of books on living a value-based life. One of the easiest ways I feel like to implement it is, if you identify what your values are. So maybe my values are, flexibility, balance, and kindness. When you go to do something and you feel like it might be a little off or off-putting, shady, whatever it is, think in your head, is this in line with my values? So if kindness is my value and I go to text Amy and be like, this chick is a real snore fest, that's not in line with my values. And then I would stop doing that. I would take a step back and I would not send that text. Or, if I was going to make fun of some girl's hair, I don't know, just point out examples here. Think to yourself, is that in line with what my values are? You can write them on a sheet of paper. You can choose one a week to try to live by. Whatever it is, try to use that value and try to make your decisions off of it. If you work in a SILA or something, in your next house meeting, come up with 3 of the values, and maybe it's a conversation you've never had before. Maybe one of your DSP's values, leadership, and you didn't even know that, and they want to have more leadership role. Identify that as their value and use it, right? We talked about our qualities and the things we're good at. We need to use that in more meaningful ways. So using your values is probably the easiest and most impactful way if you guys want to start the application of this one. We're almost out of time, aren't we? Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Okay. A is accomplishment and achievements, which is your sense of completion. Of course, we all want to have huge successes. But it's not about that. It's about the little things. And again, like that power of moments, identifying your pit and your peak of the day, right? So what's the best thing that happened today, and what's the lowest part or the worst thing that happened today? And really zoning in on those things and being more cognizant and more mindful of what those things are. So we all need to feel accomplished. We all need to have achievements, and it doesn't have to be these huge things. It can be drinking, your however many gallons of water I feel like Amy's drinking a day.
It's not gallons, people.
It's a lot. I feel like it's gallons. It could be, only having 2 cups of coffee versus 6, whatever it is. Really zoning in on what that is. And I don't have too much time, but there was a really interesting study where somebody actually followed families around Disney World and had them rate each hour 1 through 10, what 1 is the worst, 10 is the best, what their experience was that hour. So, of course, getting up in the morning and getting the kids out the door was a 2, and then riding roller coaster was an 8, whatever it was. When they actually came up with the average of their day, it was only 6.5. But when they asked them a year later to rate their overall experience, it was a 9.5. So what they took from that is that you're going to base your experiences on the best part of it and then the very last part of it. So to consider that, like when you're doing anything, house trainings, webinars, whatever it is, people are going to rate you on the best thing that happened, and then what you leave them with. So that was just kind of an interesting study that came out of that.
Yeah, and I think that for this, it's building that sort of grit and practicing that growth mindset and self-compassion, even when there's this sort of paralyzing goal to deliver. We talk about the pits and the peaks of things, and it's hard not to take some of those pits as like these when Anna and I were talking about this, we had one sort of thing, and it was talking about like your highs, but then like your soul crushing lows. And it's hard not to take everything that happens when we're sort of stuck in this cycle as soul crushing, right? And so we talk about like, is it a big deal or a little deal? And that may be different for different people, but it's, not catastrophizing everything. And so ways to do this is, having that good work-life balance and making to-do lists. And so you can have those check off, having SMART goals, which SMART goals are, sort of attainable things that you can do, take on new different job responsibilities and things that motivate you, or learning something new. And then really changing that work-life balance and having it. And so you can do some of these other things outside of work that motivate you and give you that sort of positive accomplishment.
Okay, and then last is the H. So the H is added on. So we have the PERMA model, PERMA, H. They felt like they were missing a piece of the puzzle, that they had gotten, a good paradigm, but then they're missing something. So the H is the newest one that they're adding, which is the application of the well-being. So your overall health. So they're figuring out that health has a huge impact on your well-being.
Yeah, and so it's, things like you're getting plenty of sleep, eating that well-balanced diet, exercising regularly, listening to your mind and body, limiting your screen time so you're present in the moment. All of those things, there's a lot of research showing sort of wraps up in a nice little bow everything that we've talked about previously. Having a passion and practicing regularly, having eating fruits and vegetables and not as much processed food, right? All little things that we sort of strive for every day, they have found is super important part of this whole positive psychology movement.
Mm-hmm. Look at that. Okay, so as you promised, here's the book. So Power of Moments, that's the one that I talked about. So Flourish is the one by Seligman that we talked about. It was a revolutionary book for its time. It's the first one that came out with the well-being. It's an okay book. Positive Psychology in a Nutshell is this one. It's pretty good. It's not too clinical either. It just kind of gives you an overview of what positive psychology is. It doesn't talk specifically about the PERMA model, but more about like that first section that I talked about. And then here's a couple other books that are good if you guys want to start practicing some of the PERMA foundations. Those ones are good. And then these ones are good as well. So it depends kind of what I didn't put the happiness trap on here. This one is good too. Just lots of different ideas for you guys. And again, this will come out in the PowerPoint that Danielle sends out if you didn't get it with your CEs. But readings, there's a lot more. Eat, Move, and Sleep is pretty good. I like that one as well. But just to start getting some ideas, there's a ton of podcasts. If you have an iPhone, you just go to your podcasts and put in positive psychology or PERMA. Tons of podcasts pop up. Listen to them in the car. Work on one a week, one a month. Bring it up in your meeting, whatever it is you want to do. And then as we move forward into this series, we'll talk more specifically about some of the strategies that we can all start using as well to practice some of these principles of positive psychology. And then we'll wrap up that last session with the application as well. Remember to give Danielle 2 weeks to get those CEs out. Oh, Amy's on top of it. She's got her email in there, your reminder. Go to icpn.org if you guys are interested in any upcoming or if you want to sign up for anything, that's where you'll get mailings sent right to your email for anything upcoming. Or you can do it on the website too as well, whatever is easiest. Sorry, we don't have time for any questions. But thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Go enjoy the day.
Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.